You're probably familiar with this logo. I mean, it's practically plastered all around the world on pretty much anything, from buses, billboards and cinemas to the Super Bowl in movies as well as here on YouTube. And looking at all these advertisements, it seems Coca-Cola is to be associated with happiness, social acceptance and performance in sports. But as you'll soon learn, the company behind this logo isn't what we're led to believe. This isn't a story of high-performing athletes, happiness or social acceptance. No, it's about the world's largest producer of plastic pollution, deceptive marketing, addiction, and lies regarding labels and health.
There's no waistline worry with Coke, you know.
But in all honesty, I didn't expect to make this video, as all of this started with a simple Google search to figure out whether or not glass bottle Coke tastes better than plastic bottle Coke. I'll obviously reveal that later, but it actually plays perfectly into this story. You see, the statements I made before about Coca-Cola being the world's largest producer of plastic pollution wasn't a joke. Coca-Cola produces around 117 billion plastic bottles annually. To put that into perspective, that's around 20% of the world's total annual production of plastic bottles, which, by the way, is more than twice as much as Nestle, the second most plastic polluting company. And if there's one company you don't want to beat on a list like this, it's probably Nestle. But even though 117 billion bottles of plastic are rather concerning, I find Coca-Cola's statement regarding this insane production of plastic bottles to be more concerning. Our consumers really like plastic bottles, and if we didn't listen to our consumers, we wouldn't be in business. So no, we're not going to reduce our production of plastic bottles. I can partially understand this argument. I mean, if it's true that a considerable amount of their consumers expect and require Coca-Cola to be in a plastic bottle, then of course it wouldn't make sense to remove it. But I wasn't too sure about the credibility of this statement. So I took matters in my own hands and put one of my special tools to use: YouTube polls. Now, I know asking my audience isn't the most accurate representation of the opinions of Coca-Cola's consumers, but considering Coca-Cola's ads target anyone above the age of 12, I would say it's fairly accurate. The results are also very close to what other studies have found, including FEVE, who found that 85% of respondents preferred glass over plastic. So I don't really see an argument to be made for plastic bottles from a consumer perspective, making their statement both concerning and invalid. Despite Coca-Cola preaching about caring for their consumers and the environment, it's really about the bottom line. Economics will always win, and if plastic bottles are cheaper, then that's the material that will be chosen, even if that means a drop in quality. And that's where my Google search come into the picture, because I learned something interesting. It turns out that glass is actually a way better option than plastic, or even metal, when it comes to a few but very important factors. First is what my initial Google search was focused on, which was the taste. And yes, glass bottle Coke tastes better for the simple reason that glass isn't capable of chemically interacting with liquid, something that plastic as well as metal containers do. To combat this, Coca-Cola puts an acetaldehyde lining on the inside of their plastic bottles that is designed to stop the plastic from interacting with the liquid. But unfortunately, this lining also has a rather humorous side effect that makes it possible for it to transfer into the flavor of the drink anyway, giving it that plasticky aftertaste many people experience. But the reason why glass bottles are so amazing is that they can be easily reused, which is so much better than recycling, as it takes much less resources to reuse a glass bottle than it does to recycle a plastic bottle. But if you ask Coca-Cola whether or not their different containers make the Coke taste different, well, then you will receive an answer like this. Whether you drink it from a can or a bottle, Coca-Cola is always the same. It's the same recipe, the same ingredients, and the same manufacturing process every time. And then you get this "did you know" section, where they try their best to make you think the way you drink it is the cause of the problem and not their products. Which, as you now know, just isn't the case. Meaning that Coca-Cola is lying to us when it comes to containers. Which made me wonder if they lied and misled people in other aspects of their business. Turns out, they do. And it actually starts in the same statement from before, where they state that it's the same recipe, the same ingredients, and the same manufacturing process
every time.
High fructose corn syrup. It's in 60% of America's packaged foods and drinks, which of course includes Coca-Cola. And that's weird, because in pretty much all other markets, Coca-Cola uses cane sugar. So already, their statement about them always using the same ingredients is a lie. And that's also true for their statement about Coca-Cola always tasting the same. But wait, isn't high fructose corn syrup and sugar both just used as sweeteners? Well, yes, but that doesn't mean they taste the same. The reason for that is that their chemical structures are quite different. You see, sugar is the common name for sucrose that is made up of one molecule of fructose and one molecule of glucose. Whereas high fructose corn syrup, on the other hand, is made up of around 40% fructose and 60% glucose. Because of this, people are able to taste the difference between Coca-Cola from the United States and the Coca-Cola we have in the rest of the world. This is what created the phenomenon Mexican Coke. And despite what Coca-Cola might tell us through their deceiving statements, they are 100% aware of this phenomenon. And so they found a sneaky way to capitalize on it. Enter Hecho in Mexico. This is Coca-Cola's response to the hipster craze over Mexican Coke. As you can see, it's in glass bottles and has real cane sugar in it, something the hipsters don't mind paying extra for. And to be honest, this is a genius move. Tell your regular consumers that there is no difference in the taste of Coke, no matter what sweetener is used and what container it's in, and then offer a product that completely contradicts that to the people who see right through the bullshit and are willing to pay more for it. This is fascinating and also very shady, but it gets better. As it turns out that Mexican Coke isn't what we think it is. It turns out that the United States is not the only country where Coca-Cola uses high fructose corn syrup. And yes, you guessed it, the only other country in the entire world where they also use it is Mexico. And if you've seen Johnny Harris's video on this topic, you might be under the impression that Mexican Coke imported to the United States is a lie. But that's actually not true. You see, Johnny Harris made the unfortunate mistake where he used the conclusion of a flawed study that tested the molecular composition of sodas. The problem was that the conclusion of the study was that there were no sucrose in the Mexican Coke. Instead, they only found equal amounts of fructose and glucose in the beverage. And you might remember from earlier that sucrose is just another name for sugar, whereas glucose and fructose are what you find in high fructose corn syrup, which led the researchers and Johnny Harris to believe that Mexican Coke had no cane sugar in it. And that's simply not the case. But why is that? Well, the reason why they found no sucrose in the bottles was because of a fascinating process called sugar inversion. And it's actually pretty simple to understand. When sugar comes in contact with an acid, such as the lemon juice used in sodas, the sucrose inverts into equal amounts of fructose and glucose, because sucrose is a disaccharide consisting of exactly one glucose and one fructose molecule, or in other words, 50% glucose and 50% fructose, which is exactly what the researchers found in the Mexican Coke, indicating that actual sugar was used in the can they tested. So the study did reveal something interesting. But it was hidden in the details instead of the flawed conclusion, meaning that Coca-Cola doesn't actually lie to the American consumers regarding Mexican Coke, but the Mexicans aren't that lucky. You see, Coca-Cola purchased in Mexico has high fructose corn syrup in it for the same reasons they use it in the United States: cost. Now, that's not really a big deal at all, but the thing is, Coca-Cola doesn't say anywhere on the bottles that there's corn syrup in them. Instead, they use very vague language when describing the sweetener. They either call it azúcar, meaning sugar, which is used when there's actual cane sugar in the bottle. But if there's corn syrup in it, they call it azúcares, meaning sugars. So they are using the plural form of sugar to describe high fructose corn syrup, something that isn't sugar. That's just misleading and shady. Although not as shady as when Coca-Cola tries to make their product seem healthy.
Actually, this individual-sized bottle has no more calories than half a grapefruit. Another thing, the cold, crisp taste of Coke is so satisfying, it keeps me from eating something else that might really add those pounds.
What do you do when your product contains 44 grams of sugar and it's practically impossible to hide from the fact that it's incredibly unhealthy? Especially as people become more health conscious. Well, you focus on the number of calories instead.
What good does Coca-Cola do you physically? I think Coca-Cola, as the introduction said, does have some sugar in it. It is energy.
And if you didn't know, sugar contains 387 calories per 100 grams, which would make a half-liter bottle of Coke contain just 184 calories. Therefore, it doesn't seem as bad to the unknowing consumer when picking up a can of Coke. But honestly, no one in their right mind would think that drinking a Coke is healthy by any stretch of the imagination. But what if I told you that how healthy a Coke is depends entirely on what country you're in? And no, this isn't about corn syrup versus sugar, but instead the amount of sugar in Coca-Cola's products in different markets. You see, it turns out that the sugar content of Coca-Cola's products differ drastically according to which country they are sold in. Take for example a 330 milliliter can of Fanta, which in the United Kingdom has 23 grams of sugar. Compare that to the seemingly identical version of Fanta in India that has 20 more grams of sugar in it at an astounding 43 grams in the same size container. But that's not even the craziest example. That title goes to Sprite, with a whopping 28 gram difference in sugar content in a 330 milliliter can. This means that Sprite in Thailand contains more than twice as much sugar as the one in Poland. And there are many more examples to be named, which is just baffling to think about. But why is this the case, when Coca-Cola clearly states that their products are always made with the same recipe? Well, it turns out that no one really knows, as it's not really something we're supposed to notice. And because of this, there wasn't much information available to clear this mystery. But I did find something rather interesting, as it seems Coca-Cola keeps the sugar contents of its products right around the maximum recommended daily intake in the different countries. Take for example Thailand, that has a maximum recommended daily intake of sugar between 40 and 55 grams. In comparison, the NHS recommends no more than 30 grams of sugar per day. But coincidentally, Thailand is also the country where you'll find the most sugar in Coca-Cola's products on average. Compare that to the United Kingdom, for example, where Coca-Cola offers the same beverages but with much lower sugar content, which in my theory is because the maximum recommended daily intake in the UK is much lower than Thailand at just 30 grams. This is why a Fanta in the United Kingdom only has 23 grams of sugar instead of the 41 grams you'll find in Thailand. But why is Coca-Cola doing this? Well, I believe I've figured it out. You see, we know that Coca-Cola isn't doing this because of consumer preferences in the different markets, because all beverages in Thailand, for example, don't contain the same ridiculous amount of sugar that Coca-Cola's products do. And considering Coca-Cola's statements regarding their recipes always staying the same, we know that this was supposed to go under the radar, which means they are not proud of this. Furthermore, from an economical perspective, it would make much more sense to go with as little sugar as possible, as that would save the Coca-Cola company a bunch of money per bottle sold. So there must be a really good reason why Coca-Cola is going against all logic to do this, which there is. And that reason is the power that sugar has. You see, research on rats has found that sugar is more addictive than opioid drugs such as cocaine, and that there can be withdrawal symptoms such as depression and behavioral problems when people try to cut out sugar completely. In similar studies, it has been found that there are significant similarities between eating sugar and drug-like effects such as cravings, withdrawal symptoms, dependence, and reward. But even more concerning is the fact that cocaine-addicted rats would quickly forget about cocaine when given the ability to choose between it and sugar. So my theory is that Coca-Cola crams in as much sugar as they possibly can get away with to have the highest chance of creating sugar addiction in their consumers. Highly unethical, but a great way to guarantee people come back for more. So, in conclusion, it's probably fair to say that Coca-Cola isn't the company we thought it was. Oh, and if you got this far, you should probably consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.